And welcome to the Mailbox. This is where I go through comments collected from Patreon comments, Twitter comments, YouTube comments mostly, and anywhere else. And go through the comments or questions of interest where I want to add a little bit more myself. First one is from Patreon. It goes on a bit. I'll read out the key parts of it. So at the moment, talking about the fact the carrot of Titanforge legendaries has waned too. And more looking back to my time where I'm thinking that about 90% of the game area, there's very little incentive to revisit other than rolling another out. And this is certainly true. It's not true in all MMOs in general. And it does seem to me a little bit strange, and I've said this before, that it's not utilised. But I think it's probably difficult at this point to do it. And much easier when the game's newer, because like they could do it with the Legion zones, potentially. I think what happens is when you're developing the zones, you probably should develop it with future expansions in mind as well. They could easily go back and make all the zones scale. I mean, there's various issues around that as well that they'd have to think about. But technically speaking, they could do that. The question would be, what about then populating it with stuff that is useful to do no matter what expansion you're in, and doing, you know, in other words, future-proofing it. Making it so there's still stuff to do in those zones. That's where it's a little bit difficult to do in retrospect, much easier to do while you're designing it, designing parallel. So this is the stuff that's going to be useful for this expansion. But then, you know, some of this content will also be useful for later expansions as well. Quite difficult. In theory, when I think about the Legion ones, you could say, well, the world quest could sort of stay there. Some of the rewards, of course, are going to be useless, but maybe you change it so that half the rewards are the old Legion rewards, and then half of them are updated to become more suitable for the newer expansions, the newer version of whatever replaces order resources, the newer version of whatever replaces AP, stuff like that. I suppose the problem then becomes you just increase the number of sources of the things you need to farm, and we're already at farm saturation point for a lot of players. In fact, for some players, over the farm saturation point, and they're getting sick of it, and some players are just leaving because the perception, it's largely a perception, but nonetheless people feel that they have to farm and farm and farm, and it doesn't matter whether it's a perception or not, it nonetheless leads them to thinking that it just doesn't become worth it anymore. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where they'd have to think about it as they're designing the zones, because the amount of developer time that would be needed in putting stuff into them, and you can't just, as I say, just put world quests everywhere. Because then people already at the moment, some people feel that they have to do all the world quests, or at least all the world quests that reward certain things. So to do that in older ones, unless it was purely cosmetic rewards, and I have said before, I was saying in the stream last night, I think Blizzard they underestimate how much appeal there is to cosmetic rewards. I was talking about, like in Overwatch, the loot crates that you buy, which you buy with real money, they're just cosmetic, aren't they? People do that. People want cosmetic stuff. So maybe the way they could do it is, you know, you could put world quests in some of these zones, but just have them as purely cosmetic rewards. So some people would like to farm, but if you felt a bit stressed or a bit overworked at that particular time, you know, you don't have to do it every day or something like that. That may work. So one from Twitter, someone linked me Mike Morhaim's introduction to the very first BlizzCon 12 years ago. I had seen it before, as it happens, and I've seen other ones as well, panels from that round about that time, talking about the design philosophies of Nixia and other aspects of the game. And of course, it will be very different design philosophies. There will be design philosophies they had at the time where they have completely contradictory ones now, but that is to be expected because the individual developers are different people. The most influential and senior developers we have now weren't working for Blizzard, or many of them were not working for Blizzard in 2005. They were playing the game. The game had come out, and they were players of that game. And because of you know, their involvement in the game and in the community, some of them then went on to work for Blizzard and then became influential stroke senior members of the development team. So, and also, I don't think it's always just the fact that it's different players, because I pointed out last year about an interview from Ian Hazakostas as a player talking about certain things where he has completely contradictory philosophy now. But part of that, I mean, some people will say, oh, people can change their mind. It's like, to this extent, possible, but unlikely. But it's not just the pressure of that, is it? Because we'd like to think of the developers just making their decisions based on what they think is going to make the best game. But we all know that's not true. There will be business decisions they have to make. There are people at the company, of course, you know, it's a big international company. It's got a massive, massive balance sheet. And to make sure it remains hugely profitable for shareholders, there will be people working at that company that don't give a crap about the game. They care about the bottom line. And they will put constraints on the development team to achieve certain behaviours of the players. And that may not always seem intuitively correct to us as well. But, you know, we have to accept that sometimes they will make design decisions that are the gaming decisions and we will just disagree with or agree with. But sometimes they will be doing things purely because they themselves wouldn't like to, but they just have to because, you know, you got to do what you're told. So on some YouTube comments. So the first one is about the Gnome Run. It says, you're aware the original Gnome Run is a fundraiser for breast cancer. Is this event? No, I had no idea. And also in the bit where I saw Blizzard advertising this event, I didn't see that either. Although I do think it's very strange. I don't see, for example, someone seemed to suggest that my suggestion that we just destroy all these gnomes would somehow hamper the fundraising efforts. Really sure I see that. It's a little bit like, I assume this is modelled on what we do in real life, which is in this country, and I guess other countries as well. I didn't know it was done in other countries, but it would make sense. Where people are encouraged to wear pink and go on a run, raising money for breast cancer. And, you know, people come to me, I'm not really running these days. But when people come to me and says, oh, would you like to sponsor me for this run? I go, sure. If I've got the money, I'll give it to them there and then. I don't need the run to have taken place. If they come back to me after the event and collect it, if I don't have it on me at the time, so I give it them then. Again, I don't check to see if they've done it because I would find it very strange if you turned it on its head and imagine someone came round at that time of year saying, I'm collecting money for breast cancer. Would you like to give something? And you say sure. Because bear in mind as well, you know, we have to be fair. What is charity for one person isn't to another. Some people, you know, entitled to their opinion, may not wish to support a particular charity. But, you know, this one, I think, you know, I certainly do. But it would be strange if they came to me and said, oh, what can I put you down for? And I say, well, £10. And then I said, okay, so when are you running? And they said, oh, I'm not running. I'm just collecting. Would you then say to them, oh, no. No, you're not getting any money unless you run. And you must run well. Or similarly, if they were going to do the run and then they got an injury the day before and they couldn't run, would you expect them to just not go around collecting the money after it? That would seem strange to me. Seems very, very odd. I think the only purpose a fundraiser actually serves is for raising awareness. But at the same time, the activity should be completely irrelevant in my view. That's just my opinion. Each to their own. Next one, let's move away from being political now. To ages I was discussing, the first thing I was discussing in the Tuesday Talk this week was based on a forum post, how old WoW players are. Something very interesting to me. Someone here saying, my dad is 61, he plays WoW and has done since vanilla. And I had a lot of comments from people who were sort of my age or even older, making me feel young again, even though I'm not. And but I would be really interested to know what the breakdown is. I'd be particularly interested to know what the breakdown is for certain people who achieve certain things in the game, certain achievements as well. I don't think we'd really... I mean, Blizzard don't give it out. Even if Blizzard know themselves, I mean, probably it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to even try and release it because they can't know how old we are. They can only know what age we put down when we sign up to Battle.net. I imagine there's an awful lot of younger players, because I've known players, for example, who are like early 20s, and they've played WoW since it came out. Now, you imagine that must mean that they were playing it pre-teen, which probably you're not supposed to do. So people can potentially be signing up for this thing and lying about their age anyway. So how reliable even is it? But the only thing I can go by, and even this, again, might be based on lies that people have put down, is the demographics for my channel. So here's what we've got the breakdown for the last month. It's by watch time, not by strict views. And it goes to the different age brackets here. So you'll notice there's nothing below 13 years of age. Does that mean there's no one below 13 years of age watching it? Not necessarily. They may have just lied about how old they are when they were making their account, because there's no verification. But what you do notice is there's over 80% of viewers for me are over the age of 25. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that this is an equivalent demographic for World of Warcraft playing, because this is just people from my channel. It would be interesting to see what this breakdown is for a much larger YouTuber. Let's see what Preachers is like, something like that. That would be particularly interesting. But yeah, you can see here, I mean, the biggest age category, and obviously these categories are fairly arbitrary, between 25 and 34 years old, 54% of my watch time comes from that age bracket. And then another 20% from 35 to 44. And then it's sort of reduced in either side of that. Interesting. I love stats. I love looking at stats. So next on to tier pieces. So Blizzard just recently saying they're not keen on people wearing the 2-piece plus 4-piece, which was news to me because they never previously said they were against it. And there were a lot of people providing solutions to it. Solutions that would work as well, which is what made it more baffling to me. That if Blizzard didn't like this, it's like, why didn't you fix it then? Because you could see it coming a mile off, and if you weren't, I mean, I have no issue with it, but if they have an issue with it, there are plenty of easy fixes. People put down fixes that would absolutely work, and there were quite a lot of them. So many that I even thought about doing another video just on that. But at the moment, I've got a huge list of videos I want to get done, and it's sort of lower. Or, you know, it's if the topic comes up again, I may use some of them to discuss. But someone coming here, I am going to caution on this one. So easy fix, make the 2-piece bonus a 3-piece bonus. So what you're talking about here is you've got your 6 pieces, but you get a set bonus at 3 pieces, another one at 4 pieces. I'm not so keen on that one, I have to say, because then for some players who don't have easy access to these things and that have to pug and stuff like that, you're effectively increasing by an average of 50% the amount of time it takes for you to get any set bonus at all, which can be disappointing. It's always disappointing when you get a rate tier piece and you really want your set bonus. You're just massively increasing the time it takes for a lot of players to get that set bonus. So for people who are going to do it on multiple levels, like Mythic Raiders, you're going to do it on normal and heroic for the first few weeks at least, and then you're going to be doing it on Mythic fairly soon as well. You could probably get it within a month. You'd expect everyone in your roster to have the full 4-piece, but for other players it could take a lot longer. So I would caution at that one, even though it would work. There is no argument that that would work to solve the problem, and is one of the fixes that would do that, one of the many fixes that were discussed. Next one is on legendaries. So someone has said here, on the topic of legendaries, I think we need to consider the fact that the word legendary has spread far outside of WoW these days. I mean, it may have existed before WoW anyway. I mean, it was before WoW. It was in Warcraft, but it may have been in other games as well, is what I'm saying. But it says, but in terms of these other games, Hearthstone cards are legendary, Overwatch skins are legendary, and in Fallout 4 you can even encounter a legendary raider or legendary super mutant overlord. What a title. I don't play this game, I don't know anything about it. Dropping legendary guns and armor. So I get the feeling that the term legendary is going to shift to referring more to an object of particular rarity, but still common enough that most people encounter them regularly, often with a random appearance rather than scripted in. I think with WoW it's quite difficult because you have the legendary system as it is now, and there's an it like doesn't satisfy anyone. That's the problem with it. No one is happy with it. What a lot of people want, and I'm not at all a fan of this, is the original version, which is where you have them as a super, super rare drop, like 5% chance to drop, and only one person in the raid can get it. Sometimes you need multiple bits as well, like Thunder Fury, you needed to get 2 bits and 2 different bits as well to make it. Warglaives, you needed both of them for the set. In fact, I remember Warglaives, there was a particularly knotty issue in that. I think that was the last time that they worked like that as well, because you had these farmable. Like Atiesh was probably the first one that was sort of farmable. It was still legendary. You're still not going to get many of these in your guild, but you sort of could farm it. And that seemed to be the model in Wrath as well. But yeah, with Warglaives they just dropped like 5% chance. I think in my guild as well, we must have been one of the most numerous in the world in terms of how many we were getting, because we were getting loads of them, absolute loads. We were giving them to tanks who didn't want them, warrior tanks who didn't want them, because you know we're like giving them to them, and they were going, I don't want it, I'm not going to use it. We're saying, have it. All our rogues have got them, our DPS warriors have got them, full sets. Have it. We can't do anything with it, and they're just chunter because it was clogging up their bags. They didn't want it. That's how bad it was. But in most guilds, you'd be fortunate. You might, after a good deal of farming Illidan, get a full set in your guild. Someone has the full set. Great, fantastic. They're going to be the envy of all the other rogues and DPS warriors there, and they're going to do a lot more damage and all the rest of it. But then what happens is, much higher guild, more competitive guild that's not getting many as well, because most guilds were not getting many. Comes knocking on the door and says, would you like to join our guild? We're loads better. And off they go. So you imagine it from that guild's point of view. I mean, poaching happens anyway. Poaching's poaching. I'm not totally opposed to it. But, nonetheless, you've got a situation here where that guild has just... They've had to make a decision about who they give it to. They give it to who... Either the one they think they're going to get the most benefit out of it, or the one who's being the most stalwart raider within the guild. You know, the most like determined and loyal. And then all of a sudden off they go. And that's a huge blow to that guild that's lost it. Because they can't easily replace that. They could replace the player with another rogue stroke warrior. They can't really replace it with someone with war gloves easily. So you have that situation which is not very satisfactory. Plus, of course, the fact that you make one person super happy, everyone else is really disappointed. Most particularly the ones who can't even use those ones because they're very class specific. So I think they have trouble. And like, for example, Blizzard was saying, they've been saying this all expansion, that they identified the throughput legendaries as having the issue. Not the utility ones. Everyone else was saying the utility ones are crap, we don't want them. Blizzard was saying, no, the problem is the throughput ones. So people are reading from that, as you would, that Blizzard intend in the next expansion just to have the utility legendaries. But the issue with that becomes, although it would not be a dissimilar model to in other games what legendary means, it wouldn't really satisfy people, would it? Because Blizzard think that people don't like the utility legendaries because they're not as good as the throughput legendaries. But it's not just that. It's the fact that they just don't like the utility legendaries, full stop. So if all you gave them was utility legendaries, I think there'd be a lot of kicking off. But if that is what they're going to do, then at some point we're going to find out, probably at BlizzCon, and we'll just see what the reaction is to that. We're just talking hypothetically at the moment. So next one is, go into a lot of arguments to make a counter argument. Just disagree with me. If you've got a disagreement, just disagree with me. You don't have to flannel me. I'm quite happy with people saying different things. This is about ethereals. I was suggesting that ethereals wouldn't be a great playable race. Pandaren were fine because we sort of knew enough about them. And this person's suggesting that although we don't know a lot about ethereals, having them as a playable race would allow Blizzard to reveal an awful lot about them. But my view on this one is that a lot of what makes ethereals mysterious is stuff that either Blizzard haven't worked through themselves yet, they haven't decided on which direction they want to go, and the fact that even if they have, they don't really want to tell the full story yet. I think they want ethereals to be mysterious. And as soon as you make them a playable race, that becomes more difficult, because then it's like, you are an ethereal. How can I have things I don't know about my own race? That doesn't make sense. As soon as you make something a playable race, you need a load of background lore to explain where they've come from, where they're going, what their motivations are, all the rest of it. You need all of that suddenly to be in the game. So it then wouldn't allow Blizzard to portion it out over the following years. And as I say, at the moment, they may not have even worked it all out themselves anyway. So that's my issue there. But don't worry about disagreeing. You don't have to like go, oh, it's, you know, I don't mind people disagreeing. In fact, I quite like it. It makes for good discussions. Next one was going back to a vanilla one again about, I mentioned in the Tuesday talk about class quests. I was remembering my level 20 Paladin one. Here we're talking about the warrior quest. Warriors had a number of quests. They had some quests for abilities, and then they had the Whirlwind Axe, of course, which I remember doing that as well on a warrior. I remember as well having to go to Razorfen Crawl, which is an alliance warrior, was difficult for a couple of reasons. One, to find a group for it. Two, physically just to get everyone there as well in Horde territory. On a PvE realm, but still, sometimes you occasionally had to wander through PvP areas where someone might knock you on the head. But yeah, I mean, this is the sort of thing that, again, at the moment, Blizzard can't really do. These sort of epic quest lines that would take you quite a long time you'd have to get groups for. I think partly it's because it's easier to get groups for stuff now, because people will have common interest in it. So that side of it will never come back. But the other side of it is, again, unless they made zone scale to the point where you just could go anywhere and you could go back to old zones and stuff and still get the benefit, it'd be very difficult to do that, because with each new expansion, they base the content in that new expansion zones, and there's so few zones. So when Legion came out, there were 5 quest zones, 4 of which for leveling, and the other one was only for level cap. Then the Broken Shore was populated. It was always there, but it was populated. Now we've got the other ones for Argus. But none of those new zones, Broken Shore or any of the 3 zones on Argus, not one of them has the same scope as any of the original 5 zones. They were the ones that had the most time and effort put into them. But all the content is based upon doing those zones, doesn't it? So that's the way that is. Last one. This is again coming back to the tier issue. It says, I don't think that Blizz just decided a week ago that they weren't happy with this. Now, I'm quite sure that's the case. That's what I found most baffling in that video. Maybe I didn't make it clear. What I found baffling was this can't be something that they've just decided they're not happy with. It must have been something that they weren't happy with a long time ago, in which case, why didn't they deal with it before it became an issue? That's what I was basically saying. So what they go on to say, I'm pretty sure this was the team compromise. That's an important point as well. Bear in mind as well, whenever they make a design decision, it's not necessarily that all the developers, there might be developers arguing very, very strongly for the very opposite thing. It's just that ultimately someone makes a decision. I'm not suggesting it's a democracy either. Someone will be in charge and will go, no, we're doing this, after listening to all the arguments. So this was the team compromise a long time ago. They knew what would happen and the possibilities with Titan Forge, and they accepted it. But that's the weird thing. Like, if they accepted it, then why are they now moaning about it? That's what I don't get. If it was something, because they didn't have to accept it. There was nothing that meant that this had to be. It's not like split runs. Split runs is something you have to accept. And every time I talk about this, and I guarantee it's going to happen again, someone's going to come up with an idea that says, if you do this, you don't have to have split runs. But as Blizzard have said themselves, you have to make sure that the cure isn't worse than the disease. And every time someone comes up with a suggestion for doing away with split runs, when I've had numerous comments put on my videos about it, either they wouldn't work at all, they actually literally wouldn't work, or if they would work, they're worse than having split runs. They actually just make the whole experience of raiding much worse than feeling compelled to do split runs if you're at a certain level of progress. So that is something you sort of have to accept, because there isn't an elegant solution, or at least not one that anyone's thought of. Whereas this, the tier bonus thing, there are many solutions, and people, as I say in the video I did in the last week, people put them down, and there were at least half a dozen viable solutions that would have fixed the problem. I says, I think that Ian, I actually don't know how you pronounce it, because I just look at that as a scientist. Every time I look at that and go, Ion. I think it's just an alternative spelling of Ian, isn't it? I don't know, though. Someone help me out with that. Has just decided that since we are nearing the final large piece of content, they can foreshadow changes that are going to implement for learnings in Legion. This is possibly true. In fact, any time I hear them talking about anything that they're not 100% happy with in Legion, I always think to myself, are they giving us a bit of a lead in to how they're thinking of changing things in the next expansion? Absolutely. Anytime they do something like that. It's just that, as I say, in this specific instance, like sometimes they'll do something and it's not predictable. They didn't foresee it. But this one was very foreseeable. You're not going to tell me they didn't foresee this the second they decided. As soon as someone said, right, with the legendary thing, we're going to have 6 pieces of tier, immediately, they're intelligent people. They would have known immediately some people are going to use 2 piece plus 4 piece. That would have been said. And at that point, they would have... You're not going to tell me they went away and go, oh yeah, okay, right, let's come up with ideas to try and stop that. And then when the ideas came in, they went, no, we don't like these. We'll just put up with it. I don't believe that chain of events, because there are solutions that are so simple. It doesn't have to be my solution, because my solution was fairly extreme, you could argue, even though it's my preferred one. But there are other solutions people were suggesting that were much simpler. Like, I suppose the simplest of all that some people suggested was that you are only allowed to wear a maximum of 5 pieces of tier gear, of whatever tier it happens to be. That would allow that situation. Because the old system, remember, was 5 pieces of tier gear. They've added a 6th so we can wear 2 legendaries if needs be that occupy tier slots and 4 piece. So by making tier gear with the brackets in 5, saying you can wear a maximum of 5 pieces, and that covers, tier 19, 20 and 21, that would solve it. That would absolutely solve it. They could have done that. And if we didn't have any legendaries in tier slots, then the 6th one would be an off piece with good stats on it. That would solve it. Very elegant, no problem at all. So if they were wanting to fix the situation, they could have done. So although you say that they have, it's not recently that they've become unhappy with it, they clearly at the design stage weren't unhappy enough to want to fix it, because there's so many things you could do. So there we go. Those are my comments on there. So there we go. Thanks very much for tuning in on this one. Next week, there'll be another one based on the comments that are coming over the next week. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.